A short chapter and a long chapter. But actually, interestingly enough, one sets up the other. Looking at chapter 6, God's new thing, especially looking at Isaiah 43:19, see, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Before we get into it, any questions, thoughts, concerns concerning what you read in these chapters this time? Anything? Okay. Stunned into silence again. Okay.
No,
well, let us move on. I was very interested in the very first sentence of the chapter. It is possible that the God of the gospel is in, with, and under the crisis of the virus without imagining that God is the cause of it. Did anybody latch on to that one? Oh, somebody's on the moose phone. That must mean that Noble made it. Okay. Good. How was
later
fishing?
when he says God is amid the crisis?
Yeah. And again, and I keep coming back to it, and it's probably because that's the most theology that I know. But I get back to Weatherhead, and that's that whole issue of circumstantial will. That given the circumstances, what does it mean to act in conjunction with God's will? To work toward what God is working toward in the midst of the world. Brueggemann points out that what we are seeing now, and we've talked about this already, is that we are seeing the limits of our stuff, the stuff we have counted on.
And our systems.
Yeah, well, it's not only the system, but our technology. Oh,
all the things.
The technology, power, and we can't even buy our way out of this one. And if you can't buy your way out of it, what good is it? I mean, that's the deal. But so it says, when you find out, again, it gets back to the system issue. When you find out that what you have counted on is not adequate to what you need, then you open yourself to a new possibility that there may be something more than what you thought you could count on. So he says, we are thus open to new possibilities. And what is happening in the midst of this particular time, and we've talked about this too, is that we are asking different questions. And we're looking at things and saying, why are we doing that? For example, and he talks about that, why do we have punitive incarceration? What is the issue with race relations? And by the way, what is the relation between punitive incarceration and race relations? Quite a bit, one would assume. So the situation brings us to ask questions about what we are doing, how we are doing it, and is this what we really need to be doing? In other words, and to use the old joke, does it hurt when you do that? Well, then don't do that. Well, we're finding out it may not hurt, but it's certainly inadequate. And so now we are trying to find a new possibility. Okay? So far? I really like the quote on page 58. In the assertion of God's newness, the prophet is engaged in a daring act of imagination whereby he hosts a possible world that is not yet in view. That immediately, for some reason, reminded me of the quote from Bobby Kennedy when he said, some people see things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. That's what it means to have a prophetic imagination. In other words, we are not limited by where we are. We begin to look at where we might be. Even though that would mean, obviously, that we have to make some changes in where we are. He continues, if we are to be faithful heirs and practitioners of this daring prophetic imagination, then we too, in the wake of the prophet, are summoned to engage in daring imagination concerning new historical possibilities. The heirs of the prophetic tradition are not captured by what they see in front of them, nor are they smitten by a preoccupation with that, well, I'm left out a sentence, that which once was treasured. Prophetic imagination is the anticipation of new social responsibility that is available from the intention of God of the prophets. What is now required of us is not simple fantasy, gee, wouldn't it be nice, but moral imagination to express historical possibility that is congruent with God's hope for neighborliness. Okay, again, what are we doing in these circumstances to reach God's ultimate will? Okay, does that make sense in that context? Okay. The moral imagination, rooted in promise, at the same time is grounded in the realities of dollars, laws, natural resources, and social conditions. The prophetic task is to submit our awareness of dollars, laws, and social conditions to the hopes of the Creator God. Such imagination is indeed the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. Jim Wallace wrote in one of his books, hope means believing in spite of the evidence, then watching the evidence change. That's what it means to have a prophetic imagination. To talk about it historically, I've been reading quite a bit about the history of race relations in America. And part of the problem was that people felt like they were locked into an economic system. We can't get out of this because if we quit doing what we're doing, our economy will collapse. And so there was a failure of imagination to see there might be another way to do this that did not involve the enslavement of human beings. But because of the, quote, cost, what I would have to give up, that made it seem difficult, if not impossible, to consider. He goes on, in our moment of fear and insecurity, we may be tempted to hold on to what was safe and secure. Interestingly enough, what we have held on to being safe and secure has proven not to be all that safe and not all that secure. But gee, it felt good for a little while. Prophetic tradition knows, to the contrary, that the future does not reside in old treasured realities. It belongs rather to bold, faithful thought that evokes bold, faithful action. This has always been the prophetic task, and it is now in this frighted moment our prophetic task. Okay, in this sentence, the new thing God is making possible is a world of generous, neighborly compassion. And we are seeing its importance as we are forced to see it by the situation in which we find ourselves. As I was sitting, and I was told some people this morning, I was sitting out in the yard with my friend Mo, and we were talking, and people just keep walking by. Well, it used to be people just walked by and didn't say anything. Nobody walks by and doesn't say anything. Everybody stops. And they don't know you. But, it feels like we have to relate to each other in a different way now, because we have sensed something missing in the midst of all this. Then he says, it is before our eyes. The God who does this new thing has also said do not remember former things. We have so much we would do well to forget. And there's a sentence. There's a lot of stuff that we carry with us that, you know, we'd probably be better off if we'd let it go. Okay, now that gets us to the end of that one. He says, basically in this one, a new thing's coming. And we know it's coming because we have being forced to see it because our situation now has proven that what we have counted on to get by is not adequate to the case. That's where he is at this point, I think. Reaction, reflection, what on that? On any of that?
I think I'm with him. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're fine.
I think I'm with him on how he ends up, but I'm a little concerned about that first sentence when he starts out, particularly with the idea that God is the cause of it.
No, he doesn't. He said it's not. No, he doesn't say that.
But the implication is that there are people who do think that.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Am I just totally out of touch? Or maybe I'm listening to the wrong people, but I'm not hearing that even from fundamentalists.
Oh, no, I hear it a lot. Because when you say things, okay, I'll give you an example. The lady who says, I prayed for God to give me a parking space by the door.
Yeah.
You know, and I've heard people say that, there is a sense that God is responsible for everything. And and the reason why one would do that, Lynn, is that it removes us from some responsibility.
Sure.
Yeah. It's, for example, if you believe, for example, you know, as I could say, I was raised by Arkansas Baptists, so, you know, I can talk Baptist if I need to. But if you believe that it's all mapped out, predetermined, whatever, then I have to ask a question. If it's predetermined, why are you talking to me about sin? In other words, I really didn't have a choice to begin with. See that, you know, there's the problem. Is it a free God and free people, or is it a determined God and a determining God and a determined people? And I think what Brueggemann is trying to say is we have a free God and free people. And the goal is for those free people, trying to get my teeth to work, those free people to respond to the God who calls them. But I think the first part of that, it gets back to that verse 1-6 of Psalm 77. I can get mad at God because things aren't working out because I thought God was completely in charge. So I think it's more prevalent than you might think.
But God gave us choice, you know, he gave us choice.
Yeah.
He made us people that could make choices. And
yeah.
I wonder if it also speaks to those people. Of course, we're people reading this because we have a belief, we have a faith, but to those people who would say, if God is supposed to be loving and kind and caring for the whole world, then why would this happen? Therefore, there must be a God.
Yeah,
right?
well, yeah. And then, but again, that falls back to Lynn's question. Mm-hmm. Because that presupposes an all-powerful God who's in control of everything. If that's the case, then you've got a real gripe. You know, it gets back. I think I mentioned it before. That great line from Mark Twain, who says, you know, and the Israelites slayed 10,000 people. And what do you call a God that does that? Well, you call him loving. Well, no, you don't. That's different. Okay. So, yeah, I think, Lynn, that it's a fair point. We don't know I think we want to slip back into a powerful God because it takes some weight off our shoulders from time to time.
Yeah, I see if we're talking theoretically. I guess I'm
I
just thinking
understand.
about, and I was raised Southern Baptist, so I know
Yeah,
about
well, yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I hope that I moved on from there. But it seems to me that,
No, it sneaks back in, believe me.
oh yeah, I find it all the time. But notwithstanding the fact of what people want to think of our nation, it seems to me that we're so secular. I don't hear the outcry of saying, why is God doing this to us? And why don't we need to change? It seems like this is going to pass and we're going to be right back where we were in January.
Well, maybe and maybe not, because I would counter that the people who are saying that Donald Trump is the Messiah that has been sent to take care of things by God are falling into that same trap.
When do we get to crucify him?
No, back up.
Well, it seems
November
ironic.
3rd.
It seems ironic that the movement or the thought that was going to get us back to the good old days can't deal with these days.
Oh, sure.
So there's no going back. And now there's not even going back to January. I mean, we've got to go forward or we're not going to go anywhere.
Well, but see, a part of the grief, though, is that all of a sudden that's sinking in. Because when Mo and I were talking this morning over coffee, he says the thing that makes me most uncomfortable is, he was talking about his business. He said, usually at this time of year, I can tell you where I am.
Sure.
He said, I don't know where I'm going to be in 20 minutes. And so we've got that kind of uncertainty to deal with as well. And
the educators of these schools. And I mean, it's just, yeah.
Well, his wife is a teacher.
Oh,
and I said, well, what's today's theory? And he said, well, here's what they're saying today, but we've got 15 minutes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we don't know. Let's push. Okay. Assuming that there's a new thing to be gotten to, we have to understand something. It ain't going to be easy to get there. Okay. That's another part of the problem. We have somehow assumed that every day and every way we're getting better and better. And it's not going to cost us anything, and it's going to be easy, and it'll be fine. Everything's going to be cool, no problem. Well, it doesn't work that way. And Isaiah 42:14. For a long time I've kept silent. I have been quiet and held myself back. But now, like a woman in childbirth, I cry out, I gasp and pant. Okay, men, we got nothing on this. Okay, but Michael, my son Michael, was born on Easter Sunday in 1976. I was supposed to be at a very important worship service that day because the bishop was going to be there, but I was unavoidably detained. And it was a long labor because he was 8 pounds, 7 ounces, frank breech. Oh. And but they kept saying, it's going to be fine, going to be fine, going to be fine. But after about 15 hours, they said, this ain't working. We're going to, surgery, cesarean. I saw what it looked like. I didn't experience, I didn't feel it. I wasn't hurt. I saw somebody I love go through it. Okay. And because I have, and because ladies here who have been through it know what I'm talking about, I suppose, this is a great image. Childbirth is a hell of an image. I mean, it really is, because in other words, birth is, we're going to have this bouncing baby, boy, girl, whatever. Okay. Well, that sounds nice. Well, until the 3 o'clock feeding. But anyway, that sounds nice. But in order to get there, you've got to go through the birth process. which ain't nice, you know, and they've tamed it down some. You have to think about what it was like when this guy is, you know, at that day and time. Childbirth was grim, and so it makes an even more appropriate image to share. What he's using that as is to say newness is never ever easy. And we get back to another Kennedy, John, who said, we do not do things because they are easy, we do them because they are hard. A rewording of that I would make is, we do not try to live out the prophetic because it is easy, but because it is hard, and it's because it is what we are called to do. Page 62. Under this imagery, newness is never cozy. It arrives through a struggle that turns out to be birth, though along the way the struggle may be mistaken for death pains. Again, I have not been through that, but I watched it for 15 hours, and there was some serious pain involved. Somebody's calling. Okay. Newness is not easy for the God who will create homecoming for exiles, according to this poet. Newness is not easy in creation, and I love this wording, that is too long in the grip of deathiness. That was on page 62. In the grip of deathiness. In other words, the systems that we have adopted have not necessarily been life-giving, they have been death-dealing. Okay? The process of newness is a process of pain that is very deep, so deep that it cannot be lived through quietly or serenely, so deep that it cannot, perhaps not by either the creator or the creation. In other words, it is painful for everybody involved. Remember what we said last week, I think it was Pete, in response to your question, that we believe that God grieves with us. Well, then in this change process, God's pain is with us as well. If Exodus is the example, the process of change does not begin with God, but with the groaning of the people. In other words, we do not change until we are highly motivated to change. As long as things are good, very seldom when things are going great do I get up in the morning and say, you know, things are just absolutely peachy. I think I need to change everything because I'm enjoying life entirely too much and I want to hurt some. You know, we don't do that. It is when we are forced by circumstances to reconsider and say, you know, maybe this isn't working and maybe I need to do something else. Okay. Go. What?
Well, that seems, I mean, thinking on the Exodus story, I mean, the Israelites cry out to God.
Yeah.
But you get the impression that they really don't do anything except God comes in and does this divine thing for them.
Yeah, but they have to follow.
Okay.
You know, okay. Let's assume, just to create a story, and I'm doing this right, you know, Moses shows up and he says, okay, guys, I'm taking you to the promised land. If their situation is really good in Egypt, if all is well in Egypt, how long do you think the parade's going to be?
Right.
Okay.
A parade of one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Moses, I hope you have a nice trip. You know, you and Aaron have a ball. Okay. In Luke, Jesus says the stones would shout out. This is on 64 and 65. The context does indicate shout and not groan, But you need to know that the same verb can readily mean a cry of anguish, which gets us back, remember, to Hosanna. Remember the first
chapter.
session.
Yeah.
Hosanna means not only hail Jesus, it means hail Jesus, for God's sake, get us out of this.
Saves.
Okay, it's both. It's, and so the stones would cry out, and the stones would cry out because there is a need felt on the part of those who are doing the groaning. Okay, let's see. In the future, that's 65. The future, so claims biblical faith, is not an easy, convenient gift. It is not an automatic next that comes with progress. It is not a neat technological accomplishment akin to the solving of a puzzle. It is rather a mystery-shrouded gift of God that all creatures are invited to receive in deep cost. The theological, liturgical, pastoral question of the groan of newness looms large. Let's see. And I've lost something there that I should have written down. Too often we want to rush to an answer. We don't want to work to an answer. One of the great failings of the church has always been, as far as I'm concerned, is that we want to rush to vote. And we never want to rush to the vote until it's the majority plus one on my side. And then we can say, I won. Okay, now what? Congratulations, you won. To reflect on recent history, it would be a very different circumstance at First United Methodist Church of Boston had the vote on gay rights been 51-49. But it wasn't 51-49 because a lot of people worked real hard at talking through things.
That was
painfully talking through. And so you don't get to there from here just by saying, well, I wish it were that way. And and now we've got enough votes to make it happen. You have to work your way to it, through it. And often that involves some painful conversations. Let's see, from God's side, I suppose new creation will come as God chooses, but the coming of new creation is with an ethical passion that requires us to consider the groan of newness from a human side. The truth of newness from the human side is that God's gift comes at a huge cost. The cost of acknowledging that the old creation has failed and is dysfunctional. The awareness that new creation requires disciplined, intentional reception. As a result, the move from old to new entails bewildering loss of control that comes in relinquishment. The move from an old creation marked by rapacious acquisitiveness to the new world of justice, mercy, compassion, peace, and security is one that in socio-economic political terms necessitates renunciation, repentance, yielding, and ceding of what has been. Now, I'll give you the practical version of that. How many of you, I know Kathleen does, but how many of you knew John Gibbs? Anybody?
John who?
John Gibbs.
Oh.
John Gibbs was a pastor in this conference for only about 180,000 years. And he was funny and could say things in a funny way that helped you understand deeper issues. And this was one of his quotes. He said, "Every time I got into position to take advantage of the system, somebody changed the rules." And okay, and with that, okay, and he was right.
Yes.
And with that loss, he didn't say this, but I add to it, with that loss comes resentment of the people whose advancement causes our loss, or a perception of our loss. Again, reading from the Zen's history of the United States, how people, in order to make sure that there was in the early part of the American history, there was a real concern on the part of the 5 or 10% of the people that had most of the money, that there was going to be a rebellion when the poor whites and the poor blacks joined together, because they made up like 90% of the population.
Still do.
Didn't take a lot of addition to realize that that was a problem. And so what they did was to begin to pay the whites just a little bit to oversee the blacks, and to give whites certain privileges, and then to say to them, you're getting these privileges, why? Because you're
Better.
white. In other words, divide and conquer. Okay, so if I am poor and white, and the only thing I have to hang on to is I may be poor but I am white. Then when you start talking about racial equality, what are you taking away from me?
Only thing I got.
Well, yeah. And so whenever part of the problem with change like this is that there's a cost for the people involved. You are yielding and ceding what has been. Yeah, what?
There seemed, I always, it feels like there's a false assumption in there that what I have now is better than what I don't know about that I might have if things changed, right?
Ah, but here's
And
the
I'm
difference.
not willing to take that risk.
Yeah, there you go. But you see, I know what I have now. I don't know what that means. And if
Right.
you give me a choice between what I know and what I don't know, I will take what I know, unless what I know is so bad that it forces me to try anything new.
Sure, and I feel like that's a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of what's going on right now is
Oh, sure.
with the race relations and everything is that you begin to realize, well, what I have and I'm so comfortable with and I like and I don't want to lose, wait a minute, that comes at a cost to someone else.
Mhm.
And am
Sure.
I comfortable with that?
Well, I have found, because I really believe that original sin is alive and well, I have found that if I've got a choice between me suffering and you suffering, it may be close, or it may not be close at all. It depends on how bad you've torqued my jaws in the past. But anyway, that's another deal. Let's see. Okay, this move calls to mind the old question of baptism. In a therapeutic culture, this sounds so harsh. Okay, what do we ask people? Do you renounce Satan and all his works, or do you renounce the sins and wickedness? If we really thought about that a long time, we might say, can we move on to the next question? One of my favorite stories is this: if the family was getting the youngest child baptized, they had about 4 kids already. This was the 4th one. And they get to the church barely in time. I mean, and mama looks like, she'd been rode hard and put up wet because of, of getting those kids ready. Okay, they come to the front of the church and the pastor starts off, "Do you renounce the forces of evil and wickedness?" And the woman looks at him and said, "Mister, I barely got these kids dressed in here. Hadn't I done enough already? Just, put the water on the kid's head and leave me alone." Okay. But that's an important question that we respond to, not only at our baptism, but at everybody else's baptism. We reaffirm that. But I'm afraid we do it with our fingers crossed. Maybe, I don't know, maybe in some cases I might, whether to ipso facto, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Okay. There is a groan that comes with change. And he says in 66, the groan is that mark of shock, bewilderment, and recognition that stands between the old world of death and the new world of life. And our usual response, "Oh, you mean there's a cost to this thing? Really? Yeah." Okay. There can be, says two things. There can be a groan without a future. In other words, we know things are bad, but we see no hope or we accept an answer that is too easy. In the Methodist Church, I once saw a great history of the Methodist Church, and the title of it was "Organizing to Beat the Devil." And the premise was all the different reorganizations that the Methodist Church goes through. And one of our great affirmations of faith is there's not one problem in the world that we can't reorganize the structure in order to make it go away. We would much rather deal with the structure than we would deal with the problem. I'm good at that. I'm majored in that. It's only in retrospect when I'm, can look back and go, really? Really? Or we accept answers that are too easy. Quick fix. We have a race problem. I'll tell you what, let's just make sure that there's equal representation on all our boards and committees. That took care of that, didn't it?
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds great.
How's that work?
Yeah. Kathleen and I knew Prinza Wood. Prinza was a black pastor, and a little history of the Methodist Church. There used to be what was called the central jurisdiction. The central jurisdiction was all the black churches in America. Isn't that right, Kathleen? Wasn't it all the black churches?
Yes, and
okay.
It was so they could. It was right for them.
Yeah. So, yeah. Theoretically, that's why we did it.
Yes.
Well, we merged, and Prinza came in to our conference along with a number of other black pastors, but he had been a big dog in his realm. Well, all of a sudden he wasn't a big dog anymore. And he talked about that a lot when you got to know him. Had one of the great deep voices, by the way, of all time. And it's just kind of like in the Don Snow version and, Kurt Shaw version of decibels or whatever. Great. But he talked about what they had to lose in order to be a part of us. And we didn't take that into account. We said, well, you're with us, so you must be with us. But with us usually means come in and be just like us. That's what it usually means to us. If you really cared, you'd become just like us. Strangely enough, we hardly ever say, if I really cared, I might try to be like you. Not sure why that is. I can make a guess though. John Philip Newell, we talked about him, I mentioned him before, in his book, The Rebirthing of God. Part of what can prevent us from carrying out compassionate action is not only the complexity of what needs to be done in our lives and in our world, but the sheer amount of mess and even chaos within us and between us. We built up so much stuff. Remember what it said a while ago? There's some things we need to forget. Some of the things we need to forget of all the stuff that we've allowed to build up between us. Then he says, okay, he says, there can be a groan without a future. But then he asks this question: can there be a future without a groan? Can we have Easter without Good Friday? That always used to crack me up. People want to go from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday. Don't want to go to Holy Week. So we decided to fix that. Again, one of the great organizational moves in the Methodist Church. We decided to put the entirety of Holy Week on Palm Sunday. You know, read scripture for an hour and a half so that we can get the whole thing in.
Yes.
Because we wanted to make sure people knew that a Holy Week took place. You know, I always thought that it was much more appropriate to have at least, okay, Palm Sunday, let it be a big celebration, and then end, as you well know, with Our Holy Jesus, because that was the rule. It's in the discipline somewhere. I can find it.
I'm sure it is.
I'm sure it is. Kathleen knows that. Okay, now, go from that, and then go to Maundy Thursday, and then go to Good Friday. And even an Easter vigil. Experience the whole thing rather than try to cram it into one thing. Understand that we don't get from Palm Sunday to Easter without a groan. Without, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from me? Or to use, I'm trying to remember who it was. Might have been Red Fox, I don't know. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Years ago, it was like 1972, Neil Postman wrote a book called Entertaining Ourselves to Death. And he said in the book that news comes and goes, each event sacrificing its significance to that which follows it. Monty Python used to do that on Monty Python's Flying Circus. They would do a skit and then they'd say, and now for something completely different. Well, that's basically what our newscasts are. There's a flood in Pakistan. Now let's talk about the fish fry that was held, you know. Now we have one occasion of outrage on top of another so that you can't, somebody said, well, did that happen 6 months ago? No, it happened Tuesday. But so much has happened since Tuesday that you can't remember what happened since then. In a therapeutic culture in which reality is too often reduced to entertainment, this is page 67, there's a ready attempt to eliminate the groan, to imagine that one can get from old to new, from death to life in easy fashion without the pangs of death or of birth. That is the ideology, the global economy, and its match in buoyant religious affirmation are in deep ways an act of denial, a practice of getting from there to here without any acknowledgement of the trouble or trauma or cost of newness. It is known among us that the new creation from the human side is a new network of care that requires the end of domination and exploitation, the end of controlling truth and monopolies of certitude, the end of an oil-based comfort, that makes every day one of the ease, comfort, luxury, extravagance, and self-indulgence. Or the network of care depends on a willingness to think of creation not only as a wondrous gift, but also as an uncompromising limit. I try not to think about that too much.
Monopolies on certitude, right?
Yeah, well, I'm more thinking about the practical points of that.
So-
I
yeah.
drive on occasion, a very large vehicle. And I drive it because, here's my rationalization, I have 3 dogs, 2 of which are fairly good size. In order for me to go somewhere with those dogs, I have to have a large vehicle. They will not fit in my Highlander. Okay. The cost in terms of the environment for me having that comfort is something I choose on more occasion than not to avoid. That's my, version of rationalization.
I had a thought on the cost of newness that's kind of woven through this chapter. My dad tells a story of being very aware when he got something new growing up that it cost his parents something.
Yeah.
I do not remember having that feeling about anything that I have ever received as a child, because my parents were in a different position than my dad's parents had been.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Right. And I feel like I feel like I lost something. That just having something new, whatever, that newness costs somebody something.
Yeah.
I didn't have a tangible, a way of realizing that.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem, see, is that we are trying to move what we're being called to do and what we're being forced to do, I think, within this strange time, is to raise questions about what we have taken for granted.
Nearly everything.
You're right. Yeah. We have taken things for granted. We have taken people for granted. We have taken structures for granted. We have taken organizations for granted. We have taken church for granted, and then all of a sudden it's not there. And so we have to reappraise things and say, to say, as we're repeating ourselves, but it's not just let's go back to where it was. There's something about this instant that, as Lynn said earlier, there's something about this instance that says we're not going back. We're going somewhere. Now, where is that? And where there's also this sense that we're already seeing that there's a cost involved. Maybe hamburgers are going to cost more if we pay people a living wage. Maybe I will not have the social position that I have simply because I'm white. Maybe I have learned that there was just a beautiful devotional type thing online today, written by a Muslim here in town. And it drew us all together. And maybe I am called to see beyond the parochialism that I have enjoyed, because it gave me a place. But when I say that, then I realize that I have to give up something. even though I know I need to do that? Or is that just, you know, me? I don't know. What other, that's pretty much where we are. What are you thinking about any of this?
I think it's really hard.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be hardest for our kids.
I've thought about that, Jane. To get back to what you were saying, Davis, you know, my parents were raised in a different world than I was raised in. But my kids are raised in a different world than I was raised in.
And so it will be.
Well, yeah, it's always going to be a different world, but I'm kind of wondering at some,
Very different.
yeah, my mother was raised
John?
during the, yeah,
John,
yeah,
it occurs to me that newness, like creation, does not have to be a zero-sum game.
oh, absolutely.
Where if I get something new, you lose something, or I lose something. Maybe my newness is going to take me and everyone else to a different and better level.
Well, in the long run, yes. If it gets back to what Davis was saying a while ago, and that is, can we allow ourselves the freedom to move there because of what we're afraid of giving up?
I clearly understand and appreciate that. Yes.
Yeah.
In order to gain one's life, you must lose
Yeah, to lose it.
all
Yeah.
of that, right?
Yeah.
The faith that there will be gain on the other side of this loss is hard to imagine, because I can't decide what it's going to be. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to know before I step over
Sure.
the threshold what's on the other side of the threshold.
Oh, yeah. So then I can decide if it's worth it.
Right.
You know.
It's a lack of control.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All I can say is, in my profession, before there was really good anesthesia,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can almost guarantee you that all of my patients in the throes of labor didn't think it was worth it. And
Yeah.
then once a baby was born, it was just amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
the mother was happy and the dad had passed out, so it was a perfect world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I'm looking at something that I wrote a bunch of stars around on page 66, where it's talking about the moment between the old and the new world.
Yeah.
Right. That's where we are right now.
Yeah.
And it's either and I think the idea is to adjust your attitude about what it is like to stand in the middle of that threshold, not yet able to see what's on the other side, and knowing that you're leaving something behind. There are some people that just drives them nuts, and maybe most of us. But how to get to a place where you can see the amazing thing that's about.
Okay, but again, that gets back to say, that's why I love that Psalm 77 and his treatment of it. We're sitting at the 10th verse.
Yes.
But I would contend that every minute of every day, we are sitting at the 10th verse. We have to decide whether we want to move forward or fall back. And it's not a one-time decision. And
in some cases and in some moments, we're looking more backwards.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
In some moments, we're looking more towards the forward first.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you know, I confessed last time that I was not reading the book, but this week Jane called and read to me the last two chapters, and I was just so deeply touched and moved by them. And what it reminds me of, as we're talking about this, is the deep relevance of Scripture if we're serious about it
Yeah.
and know where to look and see ourselves there
Yeah.
in those ancient words. I mean, the Scripture just over and over again, his quotes, his metaphors,
Hmm.
it's just right in front of us.
Well, there's
So
a
that
reason.
should be some comfort.
Yeah, well, there's a reason why it's stuck around this long. It has spoken to a lot of people for a lot of years. And I think that it is, and you would appreciate this, Kathleen, too, that it is much more valuable to us if we understand it as art rather than history.
Yes. Oh, yes.
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 Analogy, metaphor,
Yes.
simile. It's an incredible thing like that. What else?
The thing that it struck me the most about the newness in exile concept
Yeah.
was illustrated by those people who have been hospitalized by the virus.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being in greater exile than that, where they are alone. Some of them die alone.
Yeah.
Some of them recover. And I'm sure that after the recovery, there is a newness for them, that life is different. And the way they see life is different because of that experience. That
Well,
seemed to really catch me, at least caught my imagination on this.
well, yeah. The scene that I like to see is when somebody is getting out of the hospital, and I've seen it a couple of times, where they wheel them down the hall with all these people, and because everybody is cheering because they are delighted that somebody made it.
Right.
Crossing over into the new, right?
Hopefully. And I think though, Lynn, it's going to require, even on their part, I mean, that memory will stay with them like forever. But you and I both know that memories tend to fade in the midst of the briars of rationalization, necessity, whatever.
Soften.
And so yeah. But we're in a time, but that's the possibility, I think, of this time. Even those of us who, if we manage to stay well, we've seen too much. I mean, you don't talk about 130,000 people dying and without going, wait a minute, whoa, something's up here, and I guess that if there's anything that has really made me angry, other than making the mask a political issue, it's almost a desensitizing of the pain. People don't want to experience the pain. They want to move on. Yeah, you're dying, but we're going on. Well, no, you can't. One of the things I have appreciated, I watch Nicole Wallace in the afternoon. On MSNBC, I happen to like Nicole Wallace. And what she has been doing is at the end of each show, she gives a character sketch of one or two people who have died.
Yes.
And I think that's incredibly important. We need to know that this is not a number. This is somebody's mother. This is somebody's father. This is somebody's brother, sister, son, daughter. This is somebody that was important to people, and they're gone. And there's a cost there.
PBS on the NewsHour every night does that at the end of it, and they have a picture of the person and they tell all about it, and they have like every person that's died in the last day they have on there. They did how old they were, and
Yeah.
So
Well,
you can't
see,
forget.
if we're going to learn anything from this, we have to take seriously where we are. If we brush past this, like it really doesn't matter. We used to do that a lot. Remember when Memorial Day weekend, they would keep track of how many people were killed in traffic accidents. And it was always this number, 40,000, 20,000, whatever it was. And it just became, after a while, a number. And it wasn't like these people mattered to me. They were just a number. Well, then there's not that much different. There's not that much inclination for me to drive safer.
Well, so talking about how this might change our view of many other things, right? So the effort that's gone into, I've even heard about new ways of delivering the vaccine, not a vaccine, but something that goes in and genetically alters, right? Mm-hmm. So that the virus can't attack you, right? New ways that have never been tried before, how that might then affect how we treat other things, right? This, and how I'm also thinking about how we respond to all the many deaths of other diseases, right? If we're doing news, having sketches of, right, how might this understanding of this thing affect other diseases and how they're treated and how we respond to them?
Sure. Well, gang, 8:03.
Oh.
We made it. Semi. You might want to sit for a week and then read through it again, just for grins or not so much grins, and maybe learn something again. I find it pretty rich every time I've gone through it. I find out something else.
I would like to say thanks for talking about the poems at the end of the chapter, because to me, they were as meaningful or maybe more meaningful than the
absolutely.
work.
As I told you, Lynn, I think at the beginning, I'm usually one that skips over those.
Same here.
And I went, whoa, wait. Whoa, slow down, Turkey. There's something going on here.
I assume he's the author of these because he doesn't give another author, right?
Oh, yeah, he is. Oh, yeah. Which says something about it is great to have somebody who can write, and
he
who
writes
can express.
So beautifully.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Okay, gang, be careful. Go easy.
Thank you so much, John.
Oh, listen, it was fun. It was a great motivation to force me to read something and really read it, as opposed to skim it like I tend to do, because I have an attention span of a gnat.
Yes.
Think what you want to teach next.
You're
okay.
Right.
Well, we'll see what's floating around. I'm trying to find something that's helpful. I've been jumping around between history and everything else, and finding myself depressed. I guess I need to read Molly Ivins again or something. Or I think I may go back to Louis Grizzard for a while, just because it was funny, and I need funny at this stage. We all need funny by the way, there's some great humor floating around on the internet right now. I mean, there's something about strange times that really some people are really, really funny. And in a twisted sort of way. So been grateful for that. Y'all be good. We'll do it again.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Mhm.